Hello, everybody, and welcome to North Sports Dynasty. I am one of the two hosts, Alex Loosemore. Sorry for the delay. I said I was going live at 8:50. It is now 8:55. I'm watching the NBA Finals currently, and it's a good game. I got a bit distracted. Tonight, I'm just going to go over my predictions for the Seattle Kraken expansion draft, which is tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Mountain, which is my time, 8 p.m. Eastern. To be honest, I just didn't want to write an article. It's easier for me to just explain it instead of typing it out. So just make sure if you like the content, like, share, subscribe to YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at NSportsDynasty. And then myself, I'm at Loosemore65 on Twitter. My co-host, Andrew Faubert, is at Andrew_Faubert. We post sports stuff all the time on there. Check out the North Sports Dynasty page on Facebook. And then myself and Andrew on Facebook. As I said, with the Twitter, we're posting sports stuff all the time. So let's just hop right into it. So it's that time of year again. The Tampa Bay Lightning are once again your Stanley Cup champions. It's almost draft time. Friday night's the draft. Check out our mock drafts on www.northsportsdynasty.com. And for the first time in a few years, we have a new expansion team. As I said before, the Seattle Kraken have officially become the 32nd franchise of the NHL and will be conducting their expansion draft tomorrow night. They'll be able to select one player from each team now that each team has gone through their roster and protected the players they wish to keep. They can do two different methods. They can do the 7-3-1 method, so 7 forwards, 3 defensemen, and 1 goalie. Or you can protect 8 total skaters between forwards and defensemen combined, and 1 goalie. It is also important to note that all first-year and second-year professionals and unsigned draft choices are all exempt from the expansion draft and thus do not need to be protected. Also important to note, players have no movement clauses, and the only way that you can expose those players for the draft is if they waive it themselves. With that being said, let's take a look at who I think the 30 franchises, yes, 30. For some reason, Vegas is exempt from this. Apparently, their franchise is still too new, but, they made a cup finals and made deep playoff runs, so I think they should be in it. Nonetheless, let's see who Seattle will take. So, what I've done is I've posted in here the available players and the protected players for each team. So I'll just go through them quick, list some key available players, talk about the protected players, and then who I think each team will lose to Seattle. So we'll start with Anaheim, start with their protected players. So, here's what I'm going to do. Move that over. So the Anaheim Ducks have protected Nick Delorier, Max Jones, Isaac Lundstrom, Rickard Rakell, Jakob Silfverberg, Sam Steele, Troy Terry. So a lot of their younger forwards, a couple of those mid to late 20s in Silfverberg, Rakell, to be their main forwards going forward. And then their defensemen, they protected Cam Fowler, Hampus Lindholm, Josh Manson. Not too much to talk about there. It's their best 3 defensemen. And John Gibson as their goalie. Again, simple. Not really any other goalies that are considerable to be protected there. So now let's go to their available list. Sorry, it's a little small and tough to read. But some of the key players, obviously you've got your guys with tons of NHL experience. You've got Backes, you've got Getzlaf, Adam Henrique, Sonny Milano, some defensemen, Hayden Fleury, Jacob Larson, Kevin Shattenkirk. So quite a few key players there that Seattle could take to build around Who I have them taking is Hayden Fleury. He's a left defenseman that normally plays on the left side, also can play on the right. I believe this is a key young defenseman that they can build their roster around. And just looking at what Anaheim has to offer, if you want to go the youth but also experience side, Hayden Fleury fits that very well. Now let's go to Arizona. So they've protected forwards Lawson Crouse, Christian Dvorak, Connor Garland, Clayton Keller, Phil Kessel, Johan Larsson, and Nick Schmaltz. Not too much there that surprised me. I thought maybe Kessel would move his no movement clause, or waive his no movement clause, sorry. But he never ended up doing it. Defenseman Kyle Capobianco, Jacob Chikrin, Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Makes sense there. And Darcy Kemper as their goalie. They could have gone either him or Antti Ranta. To me, I would have gone Kemper, so good choice by them. Now let's move over to their available players. So, forwards, there's not much left there. Christian Fischer, Frederick Gauthier, Andrew Ladd, who they just got from the Islanders, Tyler Pitlick. Then you've got some younger guys like Steenbergen. To me, the forwards, it's a decent group, and I do have them picking a forward, but we'll talk about the defensemen first. Jason Demare, Alex Goligoski, Nicholas Hjalmarsson. A lot of guys that are kind of at the end of their NHL career, so if they want that veteran leadership, they could go that way here. I don't see it happening. I have them taking Tyler Pitlick, the forward. Just a good third or fourth line, maybe rotational depth piece. But yeah, I think it's a good spot for that third or fourth line forward. And a good pick by Seattle here. Now let's go to Boston. After they protected, there's not too much left, in my opinion. People might think there is, but I don't think so. There's Patrice Bergeron, Charlie Coyle, Jake DeBrusk, Trent Frederick, Brad Marchand, David Pasternak, and Craig Smith. Again, Pasternak, Marchand, Bergeron, DeBrusk, the main four. Charlie Coyle's a good second line forward. Made sense to protect him. I thought maybe they'd protect one of their incoming free agents, whether it's Hall or someone along those lines. But they went Frederick instead. Not a bad choice. Defensemen, they went Brandon Carlo, who they just extended. Matt Zelchik, Charlie McAvoy. Carlo and McAvoy are their two best defensemen, in my opinion, so that makes sense. And surprisingly, they left Tuukka Rask exposed and took Dan Vladar. Rask is an unrestricted free agent, so realistically he could go anywhere. I would still think he goes back to Boston, but we'll wait and see. Now let's look at their available players. So you've got Taylor Hall, Andre Kasha, David Krejci, Curtis Lazar, Nick Ritchie. So you've got some good second and third line forwards there that if Seattle wants to build their depth and then get some star guys in free agency or later on in the expansion draft, they can definitely do that here. Defensemen, there's not too much. You got Kevin Miller, Mike Riley, Jared Tenorti, Jakub Zboril. And then goalies, you can't see it at the bottom there, but Tuukka Rask is exposed, as I said before, and Yaroslav Halak. To me, I went with Curtis Lazar. He's a younger guy. He's on his third team right now, I believe. But again, could do with a change of scenery going to Seattle and being that middle tier guy. Might help him out a little bit. And to me, Boston should be happy with this. They're not losing too much by losing Lazar. And they've got so many guys to resign that they can use that money elsewhere. Now on to Buffalo. So the roster doesn't really show the record, in my opinion. There's quite a bit of talent on the roster. Most of it is protected here, but they protected forwards Rasmus Asplund, Anders Bjork, which is surprising to me, Jack Eichel, Casey Middlestat, Victor Olofsson, Sam Reinhart, and Tage Thompson. And then they've also protected defensemen Rasmus Dahlin, Henri Jokiharju, and Rasmus Ristolainen. Again, Dahlin and Ristolainen, one of the best defensive pairings in the NHL, in my opinion, when they're on their game. And Linus Ullmark is the goalie. There's not too much there for goalie, so that makes sense there. Now moving on to their available players. They've got some depth at forward. Drake DeJula, Cody Aiken, Zemgus Girgensons, who I thought they might go or protect. Kyle Okposo, Tobias Rader, Riley Sheahan, Jeff Skinner, who waived his no movement clause. He could have been there instead of Bjork. And then some defensemen. Like I said, there's not much there. Jake McCabe and Colin Miller are their main other NHL guys. And then Carter Hutton as a goalie. After you expose it, there's not or after you protect the players, there's not too much talent. But still not as bad as their record showed. I have Buffalo losing Colin Miller, the right-handed defenseman, to Seattle. This will be a good second or third pair right-handed defenseman for them. And this kind of hurts Buffalo a little bit, to be honest. Now moving on to Calgary. They've protected Michael Backlund, Dylan Dubé, Johnny Gaudreau, Elias Lindholm, Andrew Mangiapane, Sean Monahan, and Matthew Tkachuk. I was really happy with this group, to be honest. You got your main core in Gaudreau, Monahan, Tkachuk. Mangiapane went off in the World Championships, helped Canada come back and win the whole thing. I think it was the World Championships. I might be wrong about that. And he had to be protected. I didn't see any way around that. You had to keep him. He's on too much of a roll right now to lose him. Moving to the defensemen, they have Rasmus Anderson, Noah Hannafin, and Christopher Tanev, all protected. To me, the only one that really matters there, and I could be wrong about this too, is Hannafin. And Jacob Markstrom's the goalie, no movement clause. Nothing you can really do about that. Their available players. Just to name a few that are notable, Milan Lucic waived his no movement clause, so he's available. I don't see them taking him because his contract is awful. And then that's pretty much it for forwards, in my opinion. Defensemen, you've got Giordano, Oliver Killington, Nikita Nesterov, Alexander Petrovic. And then their goalies, you've got Louis Domingue and Tyler Parsons. Some pretty decent goalies if they're looking for a third or fourth goalie, maybe a starter for their AHL team. You could go that route. But I have Seattle selecting Oliver Killington, a good left-handed defenseman, probably second or third pair. While looking at the roster here, probably third pairing, maybe that first, or maybe that seventh defenseman, the first one off the depth chart. Pretty good defensive core that they're building here with Fleury, Miller, and Killington. Now let's move to Carolina. They protected forwards Sebastian Aho, Jesper Fast, Warren Fogle, Jordan Stahl, who had a no-movement clause, Andrei Svechnikov, Tuvo Teravainen, and Vincent Trocheck. It's a really good forward core. Sucks that Svechnikov played in the NHL right off the bat. As this was his third year, they had to protect him. Same with Dahlin for Buffalo. Had they just gone 1 year outside of the NHL since being drafted, they would not have to be protected, but that is not the case here. Defensemen, you've got Brett Pesce, Brady Shea, Jacob Slavin. Sorry if I butcher these names. I don't know how some of them are said. And then the goalie, Alex Nedeljkovic. That one was a given based on how he did in the playoffs and late season. He kind of took over that starting role. I think he's their starter for the foreseeable future. So it was good for them to protect him. Now looking at Carolina's available players. You've got Nino Niederreiter, Cedric Paquette, Drew Shore. Defensemen, you've got some good ones here. You got Jake Bean, Jake Gardner, Dougie Hamilton, who's a UFA, I believe. And then you've got some goalies there. Like the main one to me, is there one under the banner here? Oh, there's two. Peter Mrazek and James Reimer. Either of those could realistically be picks here, but I don't think so. There's one player to me that's too hard to pass up, and that is Mr. Jake Bean, adding to the defensive core, another left-handed defenseman. Probably, I would say, your second or third pair left-handed defensemen. The first and either second or third are still to come. To me, I think Jake Bean's just kind of getting lost in the shuffle in Carolina because they've got so many good defensemen. He can start on that second or third pair and build his way up and be their main guy. Could possibly start on their first pair right off the bat, to be honest. But there's a lot of really good defensemen in the near future here picking for Seattle. So it'll be interesting to see if they do this, how they rank those guys in their pairings. Now let's move on to Chicago. So they protected forwards Henrik Borgstrom, Alex DeBrincat, Brandon Hagel, David Kampf, Patrick Kane, Dylan Strome, and Jonathan Taves. Again, outside of Taves, Kane, Strome, and DeBrincat, there's not too much on this roster forwards-wise. Defenseman, you protect Caleb Jones, who you got in the Duncan Keith trade. Really smart move. Connor Murphy, arguably their best defenseman, and Riley Stillman. Then the goalies, you could really go any way with it. I protected Kevin Lankinen. Well, I would have protected Kevin Lankinen, and they did as well. So there's some pretty good goalies being exposed here. Now let's see who's available for them. So you've got Josh Dickinson, Adam Gaudette. You've got, for defense, you've got Calvin DeHaan, Nikita Zadorov, who I personally would have protected, but that's neither here nor there. They didn't, so he's available. And the goalies, again, you really could have gone any way with any of the three, Colin Delia, Malcolm Subban, and Lankinen. To me, Seattle gets their first goalie. It's the third best goalie out of the three. They pick up Malcolm Subban. This will be their security blanket in case one of the guys gets hurt, or he'll be their AHL starter. If they get an AHL team right off the bat, I'm not sure how that works. Moving to Colorado. This was a tough one because there's so much talent. This is the first. So everyone so far has done the 7-3-1 method, 7 forwards, 3 defensemen, 1 goalie. This is the first one where we see – oh, wait, no, they ended up doing the 7-3-1. Sorry, my apologies. I thought they were doing the 4-4-1 or the 8-1, I guess. We will see it later, though. Somebody did do it. But in this case, they protected Andre Burakovsky, Tyson Jost, Nazem Kadri, Nathan McKinnon, Valerie Nichushkin, Logan O'Connor, and Mikko Rantanen. The main one that's not protected is Gabriel Landeskog, who's a UFA, unrestricted free agent. Most people think he's gone because he wants $10 to $15 million a year in free agency, and Colorado can't give him that, especially because they have to re-sign one of the guys they protected in Cale Makar. So obviously Makar's been protected along with Samuel Girard and Devin Taves, 4-year defensemen. Again, they have so many tough choices at forward and defenseman. But to me, I think they made almost the right choice all across the board. I would have switched out Burakovsky and Nichushkin, or O'Connor, really, for guys that we will talk about in the available section. And when it comes to goalie, there wasn't really any debate. Grubauer is the one you protect. So on to the available players. When you look at the forwards, I would have kept JT Comper and Jonas Donskoy, to be honest. I know they've got higher cap hits, around like $4 million or whatever it is, but I would have kept both of them. To me, they're way too valuable to this team. But other than those two, you have Landeskog, who we talked about before. You have Brandon Saad, Carl Soderberg. When you move to defensemen, I guess the majority of their young defensemen, Bowen Byram and stuff, and people like that, still don't need to be protected. They're not eligible for this expansion draft. So you look at it, you got Eric Johnson, who I believe waived a no movement clause. You got Patrick Nemeth, and then goalie, you have Devin Dubnyk, who could potentially go, but to me, there's too much talent for Seattle to waste a pick on another goalie. They lose one of those forwards I would have protected in JT Comper. This is a good second, third line player on most teams. Could potentially hop up to that first line. But looking at the players I have them getting later on, I would say second line. Really good value for this team. Could be a key player for Seattle for the next couple of years. Moving on to Columbus. And the Blue Jackets, to me, are one of the weaker rosters, and you've got a lot of people that don't want to be there anymore. So look for them to blow it up, and a lot of these guys that are protected to be traded potentially. And the big one there being Seth Jones. But so forwards, you've protected Cam Atkinson, Oliver Bjorkstrand, Boone Jenner, Patrick Laine, Gustav Nyquist, Eric Robinson, and Jack Roslovic. To me, it's surprising to not see Max Domi protected. I would have thought you stick with him and try and build him up, but they're going to expose him. Defensemen, Vladislav Gavrikov, Seth Jones, and Zach Werenski. This is just the Seth Jones one is so they can get something for him, because he has pretty much demanded a trade, said he no longer wants to be there. So look for him to be in a different jersey at the latest by the trade deadline. But again, those are your most talented guys. That's who you protect. And a no-brainer here, Jonas Korpisalo, protected by Columbus. Best goalie they have, so it makes sense to keep him. You can't let him be exposed after you let Bobrovsky, well, not necessarily let Bobrovsky walk, but he walked, and this is your new guy to build around. You can't let him be exposed. When it comes to their available players, as I mentioned, you have Max Domi, Nathan Gerbe, Mikhail Grigorenko, not too much else forward-wise. Defenseman, again, not much. Michael Del Zotto, a bunch of average players after that. To me, this is a no-brainer. You get Max Domi, give him that change of scenery again. See if you can build around him. That's one of those young pieces to build your future with, while also being able to potentially win now. To me, kind of a boneheaded move by Columbus and a big pickup by Seattle. Moving on to Dallas. Their protected roster. You've got forwards Jamie Benn, Radek Faksa, Denis Guryanov, Rube Hintz, Joe Pavelski, Alexander Radulov, and Tyler Seguin. Again, your cores there with Ben, Radulov, and Seguin. And defensemen, Miro Heiskanen, who just signed a huge deal Saturday morning John Klingberg, and Lindell. Again, your defensive core, good to protect them. And in a surprising move, Ben Bishop waived his no movement clause so they could protect Anton Khudobin. So looking at their available roster, you've got Andrew Cogliano, Blake Como. Their forward core is mainly these kind of guys. Mid to late 30s could be your fourth line forwards, veteran leadership. Defensemen, Taylor Fedun, Ben Gleason, Julius Honka, Jamie Alexiak, Mark Pysyk, Andre Sekera, Sami Vatanen. Same thing. You're pretty much getting veteran leadership from this team. Even at the goalie, you'd probably go Ben Bishop if you pick here for a goalie. Again, just veteran leadership. And this is pretty much what this team would be, what a player from this team would be picked for. There's not much else. Most of the talent is already protected. So when it comes to Seattle, I think they get Blake Como to be that veteran leadership. It doesn't cost too much. Contract comes off the books in the next year or two. Not too much really else to say for Dallas. Now let's move on to my Detroit Red Wings. So to me, this is pretty much spot on what I thought they would do. Minus, I didn't think they'd protect Giovanni Smith. When we get to the available players, I'll instead say who I thought they would protect, but they protected Tyler Bertuzzi, Adam Ernie, who I'm very happy about, Robbie Fabry, Dylan Larkin, Michael Rasmussen, Giovanni Smith, and Jakub Vrana. To me, the majority of those forwards it's a given. Bertuzzi, Fabry, Larkin, and Vrana are your main forwards now to build around. Rasmussen, Giovanni Smith are part of that future. And Adam Ernie was a really good third line forward. Actually led the team in scoring. Yes, I know technically Mantha still did, but he was no longer on the team. So when you're talking players that finished the season as a Detroit Red Wing, Adam Ernie led the team in scoring. For defensemen, there's a few different ways you could go here. I like how they did this. They went Filip Hronek, Nick Leddy, Gustav Lindstrom. You protect your top pair in Leddy and Hronek, your left and right side, and you protect Lindstrom, your up-and-coming defenseman. Goalie, it was an absolute no-brainer to protect Thomas Greiss. We don't really have much else when it comes to goaltending. So looking at the available players, there's actually, and sorry for the crappy quality there where it looks weird. I took the pictures on my phone off my computer screen and downloaded them on here. So if some of them are crappy, my apologies. But when you look at this, you've got some older talent, some younger talent, like still some decent players here for Seattle. Sam Gagner, Valtteri Filppula, Taro Hiro's the younger one. Vladislav Nemesnikov, I thought maybe they would protect. Evgeny Svechnikov just hasn't really panned out. Most people have Seattle picking him. And then you look at the defensive core. You've got Dennis Cholowski, who's a younger left-handed defenseman, hasn't really panned out much. You've got the older guy in Danny DeKeyser. He give you that veteran leadership in that defensive core. Could have gone for one of the younger guys, Juice, McElrath, Troy Stetcher, a lot of people have said Seattle could look at. Goalie, I wouldn't really sniff at if I'm Seattle. Bernier, maybe, to be your third or fourth goalie. Boyle and Fulcher are nowhere near ready for that. So a fairly more difficult decision for Seattle than I think a lot of people realize. I am going off the beaten path here. I'm not having them take Svechnikov. I am instead having them take Dennis Cholowski to be that, compete for that third left defensive pairing. Maybe a change of scenery could help him out. He could still fight for that first pair left defenseman. To me, right now, I just don't see it. I'd be sad to see him go still, but to me, it makes the most sense for Seattle. Now moving to the Edmonton Oilers. So there's a few surprising moves. First off, Zach Kassian. I didn't think they'd protect him. I thought they'd let him be exposed and potentially go to Seattle. They also protect Josh Archibald, Leon Draisaitl, Connor McDavid, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Jesse Puljujarvi, and Kyler Yamamoto. Again, a bunch of no-brainers there. Draisaitl, McDavid, and Nugent-Hopkins are your core now. Puljujarvi and Yamamoto are your up-and-comers to build around. Kassian and Archibald, at that point, it was just kind of whoever. I thought they'd protect some of the younger guys, but they instead protect those guys. Moving on to the defensemen, protect Ethan Bear, which is a good move. Decently young defenseman. A lot of your really young defensemen, your Evan Bouchard, Philip Broberg, all those guys don't have to be protected yet. They're not eligible. So you go another young guy to build around. And then Duncan Keith still technically has his no movement clause. They probably would have protected him anyways after just trading for him. And Darnell Nurse, which is a really good move. He looked in the playoffs like a true number one defenseman. Hopefully he can keep that up for them. And then the move I really like and that I was also pitching is they protect Stuart Skinner, the young goaltender. You've got Koskinen, who's in his mid-30s. Smith, who's 39, 40. Doesn't really make sense to protect them, especially with Smith being a free agent. And it sounds like they're buying out Koskinen, so again, it doesn't make sense to protect them. Stuart Skinner's your guy here. They'll probably draft one on Friday or Saturday. But Skinner's your guy to build around for the future until shown otherwise. They're available players. So you've got some decent forwards here. Probably fourth line forwards for Seattle. In Tyler Benson, Alex Chason, Tyler Ennis, Seth Griffith, Dominic Cahoon, Jujhar Khaira, James Neal, could maybe be a third line forward. Then you've got the younger guy, Devin Shore, here, who a lot of people are looking at. Then defenseman, you've got Tyson Barrie, a UFA. Probably would have heard if they were going him by now, as they had 3 days to sign him. Oscar Klefbom. If you can build a good roster before and you're willing to take the risk on him with his injury, I would personally do it because if he comes back, that's a number one defenseman. But I was scared away from it because of his injury. And he says he doesn't know if he's coming back or not. So to me, I didn't like that, so I stayed away from him. You've also got Slater Cuckoo, Dmitry Kulikov, Adam Larson, a UFA, and Chris Russell. And then, as I said, for goalies, you've got Koskinen, Mike Smith. If you really want to go for them, by all means, do it. But to me, the Seattle Kraken get a depth forward in Devin Shore, a guy to develop and build for your future. Looking at the players and their cap hits here, none of them really make sense other than Shore. So, they look to the future when looking at the Edmonton Oilers. The Florida Panthers protected Alexander Barkov, Sam Bennett, Anthony Duclair, who they just signed to an extension, 3-year extension. I don't remember the money. Then you've got Patrick Hornqvist, Jonathan Huberdeau, who I believe is on a no movement clause, Carter Verhaeghe, your forward core, Barkov, Bennett, Duclair, Huberdeau, Hornqvist. You've protected them. Makes sense. Defensemen, they bought out Keith Yandel so they could protect the other two to be named here. But Aaron Ekblad, absolute no-brainer, one of the better defensemen in the NHL. Then you've got Gustav Forsling and Mackenzie Weegar. You don't have to pick between them. You can protect both now. And with the no movement clause and Spencer Knight not having to be protected yet, not eligible, they obviously have to protect Sergei Bobrovsky. So, looking at the available players, don't really have to talk this one, but we will. It's pretty much a given who they're going. and it's already pretty much been reported. But when you look at the forwards, there's not too much left. You've got Lucas Wallmark, Alex Wenberg, Frank Vetrano. Defenseman, same thing, not too much left. Noah Juleson, Brandon Montour, Marcus Nudavara, Anton Strawman. The guy that A, I have them taking, and B, it's pretty much been reported that it's a given that they take, is Chris Drieger. Sounds like he's going to sign there and be the pick from Florida. Oh, good finish to the game here. Looks like Milwaukee is about to be the NBA champions. Congrats to them. Moving on to the Los Angeles Kings. Protected roster. You've got Elias Anderson, Victor Arvidsson, who they just traded for from Nashville. Dustin Brown, Alex Iafallo, Adrian Kemp, Anze Kopitar, and Trevor Moore. Again, outside of Arvidsson, Brown, and Kopitar, not too much there. Could have really gone either way with a bunch of those guys. Defenseman, I got to pull the banner down so you guys can see the goalie. Drew Doughty, Matt Roy, Sean Walker. Again, outside of Doughty, not too much there. And the goalie, Calvin Peterson, they exposed Jonathan Quick. I don't think he's going to get taken, to be honest, but he is exposed nonetheless. When you look at the Los Angeles Kings and who they have left available, Andreas Athanasiou, who did fairly well in LA this year, all things given. Martin Ferk, Carl Grunstrom, Brendan Lemieux, Blake Lizotte, Austin Wagner, a bunch of depth forwards. Maybe they tempt Seattle. When you get to defense, the only one I really see, maybe two, that make any sense for Seattle, Oli Mata and Christian Wolanin. And the goalies, I don't think you take Jonathan Quick with that contract. To me, they get tempted by forward. Had Athanasiou not been a free agent, I say they go there. Instead, they take Brendan Lemieux, get him for a year. Depth forward, maybe fights for a fourth line spot. And then if they don't like him, he's off their books. When it gets to Minnesota, the Wild have done a good job basically this offseason getting ready for this. They bought out Parise and Suter. They were able to protect Matt Dumba, protect all the forwards they wanted. They did a great job with this. You got Joel Eriksson-Ek, Kevin Fiala, Marcus Foligno, Jordan Greenway, Ryan Hartman, Nico Sturm, and Matt Zuccarello. There's a few no movement clauses in there. Zuccarello comes to mind. Foligno, I believe. Good forward group to protect, though. This is their bread and butter here, though, is the defensemen. You've got Jonas Brodin, Matt Dumba, Jared Spurgeon. Again, getting rid of Suter made it so they could protect everybody and still go that 7-3-1 method instead of the 8-1. And the goalie, Cam Talbot. Not too much to argue there. He's kind of become the number one goalie there when it comes to available players. Should put the banner back up. When it comes to forwards, Nick Bjugstad, Victor Rask, Dmitry Sokolov, a few second, third, fourth line forwards for Seattle if they want to go that way. Some defensemen. Not too much left. Ian Cole, Ian McCoshen. Not anything. And goalies, Andrew Hammond and Capo Kakinen. To me, they go potential second line, probably third line forward in Nick Bjugstad. Really good piece for them. Big loss for Minnesota. And let's move on to the runners-up in the NHL, the Montreal Canadiens. The big one here is Carey Price is exposed. And that's kind of been the talk of the NHL the last couple days since the protected rosters came out is, do they protect him? Do they protect Jake Allen if Price will move his waive his no movement clause? Turns out he waived it, so it'll be interesting to see if Seattle will bite on that contract. When it comes to their protected players that they have, forward group, Josh Anderson, Joel Armia, Jake Evans, Brendan Gallagher, Kotkaniemi, Arturi Lehkonen, and Tyler Toffoli. When you looked at it in the playoffs, one, Cole Caulfield does not have to be protected. Then you've got Toffoli, Lehkonen, Kotkaniemi, Gallagher were their main guys. Evans, Armia, and Anderson played a big role for them too in that depth role. When it comes to defensemen, again, another pretty big one in my opinion. Shea Weber is exposed. Sounds like he's not going to play at all this year, though, so I don't think Seattle will bite on that. They protected Ben Sherratt, Joel Edmondson, and Jeff Petrie. And with Carey Price being exposed, they protect Jake Allen, who I think would have been a lock for Seattle to take. Drieger and Allen would have been a really good 1-2 punch. Montreal shuts that down. When you look at Montreal's available players, you've got Philip Deneau. Jonathan Drouin is a big one who didn't play in the playoffs or the end of the season there. Had some personal issues, stepped away from the team. Corey Perry played a big role with Eric Stahl on that fourth line, that veteran line that played really well. So if they want that veteran leadership, they could go there. I believe Corey Perry for sure is a UFA. Not sure about Eric Stahl. You've also got Thomas Tatar, Lucas Vedemo, and Jordan Wheel. Pretty good forward group, actually, if you ask me. A lot of talent, a lot of depth there. When you look at the defensemen, there's some pretty good depth there, too. You've got Cale Fleury, John Merrill, Eric Gustafson, Gustav Olofsson, Xavier Ouellette, Shea Weber, and then the goalies. Only one there that's notable is Carey Price. So when you look at Montreal's roster, to me, I don't think they bite on Carey Price. I'm not buying it. It's a 5 or 6 year contract at $10.5 million. He's doing $11 million signing bonus in September. To me, the way Seattle's talking about building a roster, that's too much. He'll be like 36, 37 by the time the contract's up, I believe. Worth it. It would be worth it for a couple of years. The end of that contract, though, not so much. To me, instead, they go Cale Fleury, get a young right-handed defenseman to build for the future. To me, there's other good enough goalies where you don't have to bite on Price. You can use that money elsewhere. You can go to free agency. Instead of spending the $10 million on Price, you could go spend $10 million on Landeskog if you really wanted. He could be your captain for your first year franchise. To me, that's a better move. To be honest, use that money to build the team around them. Drieger and Subban right now is a decent 1-2 punch. I've got another goalie coming to push Subban out and make a really good 1-2 punch here. Moving to Nashville, it's not from here. By the way, congrats to Pekka Rinne on a great career. Glad to see him retire before it's too late, before he really falls off that cliff. Hell of a career. Now looking at his team to begin with, it is now basically official. The Milwaukee Bucks are your NBA champions. Giannis will likely be the NBA Finals MVP. Getting back to Nashville and the roster, forwards, Philip Forsberg, Luke Kunin. Not like Forsberg, yes, but not really anything else to protect there. So instead of doing a 4-4-1, they do a 3-5-1. Protect Alexandre Carrier, Matthias Ekholm, Dante Fabro, Roman Josi, Philip Myers. Really good defensive core. They had to protect as many of those guys as they could. And UC Saros as your goalie. Now that Rinne's gone, Saros is your guy of the future. And the now But he's your goalie to build around. Looking at the rest of this roster, there's some really good top-end forwards if you're Seattle. To me, I'm looking at Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson. There's also good depth forwards underneath them. You got Nick Cousins, Mikael Granlund, Eric Holla, Cal Yarncroke. To me, there's too many Colton Sissons, too many good forwards to pass up on. They've pretty much cleaned out the defensemen, if you ask me. And the goalies, there's not too much to look at either. To me, this is between Duchene and Johansson getting that first line forward. And to me, I have them getting Johansson probably if they trade something to get them to take that contract. Either way with Duchene or Johansson. But a big time forward for Seattle to build around. Moving on to the New Jersey Devils. Their protected roster: Jesper Bratt, Nico Hischier, Jan Kukkonen, Michael McLeod, Igor Sharangovich. Holy, that's a mouthful. Miles Wood and Pavel Zacha. Decent forward group outside of Hischier, not too much there. Defenseman Ryan Graves. I believe that's who they got from Colorado in that trade, where Colorado was just trying to get rid of a defenseman that they no longer had to protect. Damon Severson and Jonas Siegenthaler. Outside of Graves, there's not too much there to protect. Their main noteworthy defensemen are exposed because most of them are terrible contracts. And for goalies, Mackenzie Blackwood is your guy to protect. Not too much of a debate there when you look at their available players. To me, it's pretty much, if you want to go forward, you would go Nick Merkley, get a youth forward to build around. Defenseman, Will Butcher, Connor Carrick, Ryan Murray, Colby Sissons, PK Subban. A lot of pretty bad contracts. You just hope Seattle bites on one. Then, for goalies, not too much to debate there. Evan Cormier, Aaron Dell, Scott Wedgwood. To me, Seattle bites on one of these contracts. They get their, in my opinion, probably first pair right defenseman. Yeah, I would say so, just based on the roster here, in PK Subban. It's essentially a 1-year, $9 million contract for New Jersey. It's one of those marketable guys to build around for a year, get people excited about the team, and then if he doesn't perform, or if he performs, you get him probably at a lesser value. If he doesn't, you let him walk. Not too much to debate there. There's not much to pick from when it comes to New Jersey. Before I move on to the Islanders, I'm just going to take a little break here. I'm going to put on one of Andrew's ads here. Just give us a look this week on North Sports Dynasty. Friday night tonight, or this week, we're doing it for the NHL draft. We're going live right as the Detroit Red Wings pick. That's mine and Andrew's team. And it gives us 5 picks to kind of recap. It seems to be the 5 main guys are going to go 1 through 5. So it'll be interesting to see if that checks out. I'll be back in a few.
Super Bowl champions. Damn, does that feel good. You know what else feels good? When you get to become a champion yourself. Yes, and if you follow North Sports Dynasty with me, Andrew Faubert, and my co-host, Alex Loosemore, you're going to get all the content that you're going to need to win your upcoming fantasy football leagues. Whether it's half PPR, full PPR, Dynasty, like we're pretty good at, or anything else that you need, we got all of it. All of that content that you're going to need in order to win your championships. So follow us, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, anywhere that you see the North Sports Dynasty logo or me and Alex. Follow us, like us. We're live every single Saturday, 11 a.m. Mountain Time, in order to give you the best quality content that you need. And when we get closer to the season, we'll be going double time with our shows to make sure that you guys got all the tricks and turns to win your league week in and week out. So stay tuned to North Sports Dynasty.
So as Andrew said there, make sure to tune in to North Sports Dynasty. Check us out, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Make sure like, share, subscribe. It really helps us out. Let's get back to the expansion draft. So with the New York Islanders, this was actually a pretty deep roster, so it was interesting to see what they were going to do. In one of the weirdest trades ever, they made a trade with Arizona for Andrew Ladd. Sorry, just forgot the name. Wanted to go back and look. They gave up a second-round pick this year, conditional second round next year, and a 2023 conditional third-round pick for nothing in return, just to get that contract off the books. One of the weirder trades I've seen. But they did it so they could protect the following players. They protected forward Matthew Barzal, absolute no-brainer, Anthony Beauvillier, Cal Clutterbuck, Anders Lee, Matt Martin, Brock Nelson, and Jean-Gabriel Pageau. Really good forward group. One of the deeper rosters in the NHL, top to bottom. When you look at the defensemen, they protected Scott Mayfield, who played really well for them in the playoffs. Glad to see him stay there. Hope he can build on that for next year. Adam Pelech and Ryan Pulock. And an absolute no-brainer here, they protect Semyon Varlamov, who's been their mainstay for the last couple of years. Ever since, what's his name? Went to Vegas. The name will come to me at some point here. When you look at their available players, like I said, one of the better rosters top to bottom, as you still have some key players left exposed. You have Casey Cizikas, Michael Dal-Cole, Jordan Eberle, Josh Hosang, Leo Komarov, Kyle Palmieri, Richard Panik, who they just got in a trade from Detroit, Travis Zajac. Really good forwards left available. And when you look at defensemen, you've got Sebastian Aho, Braden Coburn, Thomas Hickey. Not too much left on defense. And then Ken Appleby and Corey Schneider. Not too much to look at there when it comes to goalies. To me, they go get probably a second-line winger for them. They get Jordan Eberle. Played well when it came to the playoffs. Kind of was lost in the shuffle when it came to the season. And seems like the odd man out in that forward group. So I think with him being exposed, they go get him and try and see if they can recreate that magic with him. When it comes to the Rangers, they've protected forwards Pavel Buchnevich, Philip Chittle, Chris Kreider, Artemi Panarin, Kevin Rooney, Ryan Strome, and Mika Zibanejad. Not too much to argue with here. Some good forwards. Whether it's top guys like Panarin and Zibanejad or depth guys, they protected the right guys here. When it comes to defensemen, Libor Hajek, Ryan Lindgren, and Jacob Trouba. Again, not too much to argue there. There's one that I would have kept protected, and in my opinion, they end up losing him. So we'll talk about that in a second. And Alexander Georgiev, absolute no-brainer. He's their goalie of the present and future. When it comes to available players, you've got some decent but not great guys to go off of. You got Colin Blackwell, Philip DiGiuseppe, Julian Gauthier, Barclay Goodrow, who they just got from Tampa. And then you look at defensemen, Anthony Bitetto, Tony DeAngelo, Nick DeSimone, Jack Johnson, Darren Radish, Brendan Smith. Then goalie, you've got Keith Kincaid. Not much to look at there. To me, the absolute no-brainer was Tony DeAngelo. Just makes sense. I thought he was too good to leave exposed. One of their better right-handed defensemen for the NHL roster for the coming season and for a couple seasons to come. Really good pickup here by Seattle. When you look at Ottawa, there's not too much to look at. It's a pretty bad roster. I mean, they've been at the bottom of the NHL for the last couple of years. A lot of their main guys are guys they've drafted recently and don't have to be protected. They're not eligible. When it comes to the guys they've protected, you've got Drake Batherson, Connor Brown, Logan Brown, Nick Paul, Brady Tkachuk, who's been in a lot of trade rumors, Austin Watson, and Colin White. When it comes to defensemen, you've got Thomas Chabot, Victor Mete, and Nikita Zaitsev. Not much to argue with there. That's the best defensive group you probably could have came up with. And to me, a no-brainer here. You protect Philip Gustafson, your goalie for the future. And now really is James Reimer. Not James Reimer. Matt Murray starts to kind of fade out. As I said, not too much left here. Artem Anisimov, Evgeny Dadonov, Ryan Zingle, Jakob Paka, Matthew Pekka, Derek Stepan, Chris Tierney. You've got Josh Brown. Not too much else. You could go Matt Murray if you think you can revitalize him, but to me, not worth it for that kind of money. So when I look at Ottawa, I struggled with this one, to be honest, but I ended up going Josh Brown. Decent young defenseman, can fight for that third pairing. Or if you got an AHL team, he could be one of your main guys on that team. Moving on to Philadelphia. They made some moves. They moved on from Nolan Patrick, who's now a Vegas Golden Knight. Got Ryan Ellis. Made some good moves to protect some other forwards that they wanted to protect. So, Nicholas Obkubel, I hope I'm saying that right. Sean Couturier, Claude Giroux, Kevin Hayes, Travis Konechny, Scott Lawton, and Oscar Lindblom. Their main core, especially after moving Nolan Patrick. So a good group to protect. Not too much to argue with there. And their defensive core, you've got Ryan Ellis, Ivan Provorov, and Travis Sanheim. Again, could have maybe protected Gostisbehere, but not too much to argue with otherwise. And goalie, the only acceptable option was Carter Hart. When you go to available players, to me, you could have gone goalie with Brian Elliott, but he's getting up there a little bit. Defenseman, definitely Shane Gostisbehere is one to look at. Then you've got some decent players with horrible contracts, looking at Jakub Voracek, JVR, James Van Riemsdyk. To me, the clear one here was Shane Gostisbehere. If you can get his mind right and get him playing like he used to play, that's your top left-handed defenseman. To pair with PK Subban, that's not a bad defensive pairing at all. Moving on to the Pittsburgh Penguins. To me, this one kind of confused me a little bit. I thought they should have protected Jared McCann instead. I believe it's Jared McCann. Instead, they traded him to Toronto. Nonetheless, they protect Teddy Bluger, Jeff Carter, Sidney Crosby, Jake Gensel, Kasperi Kapanen, Evgeny Malkin, and Brian Rust. Pretty good forward group. Good, not great at this point. When you look at defensemen, you've got Brian Dumoulin, Chris Letang, and Mike Matheson. Again, good, not great. And Tristan Jarry as their goalie. Not much to argue with there. When you look at available players on the Pittsburgh Penguins roster, you've got guys that are noteworthy. I guess you got like Colton Sceviour, Brandon Tanev, Jason Zucker. Zucker's interesting. He's got a pretty bad contract, but a pretty good talent. Defenseman, you've got Cody Ceci, who was pretty hyped up in Ottawa. For some reason, didn't completely pan out. I think if you give him more of a chance, he could take that next step again. Yeah, not too much else otherwise. Like Maxime Legas, however you say his name, potentially for a younger goalie. To me, I have them going Cody Ceci here, right-handed defenseman, competing for that second, third, fourth right-handed defenseman. Not too much else to say there. Not too much to pick from when it comes to Pittsburgh. Slowly becoming a weaker roster. When you look at San Jose, they didn't have much to protect, to be honest. Outside of defensemen, it's a pretty bad roster. You got Rudolph Balcers, Logan Couture, Jonathan Dahlin, Thomas Hertl, Evander Kane, Kevin LeBlanc, and Timo Meyer. Defensively, you've got Brent Burns, Erik Karlsson, Mark-Edward Vlasic. Not really too much to debate there. And in a really good move, they trade for Aiden Hill from the Arizona Coyotes, and they protect him. Looks like he's going to be their goalie going forward. When it comes to available players, as I said, there's not much here. You've got like Patrick Marleau, Matt Nieto, defenseman Nick Maloche, Greg Paterin. Goalie, you could go Martin Jones, see if you can get anything out of him, but it's a horrible contract. To me here, you go Nick Maloche, another young defenseman to build for the future. When it comes to St. Louis, still a really talented roster. Looks weird not seeing Tarasenko on there, though. But nonetheless, they protected Ivan Barbashev, Jordan Kyrou, Ryan O'Reilly, David Perron, Braden Shen, Oscar Sundqvist, Robert Thomas. Defensemen, they protected Justin Falk, Torrey Krug, Colton Parayko. Not too much to argue with. Krug and Parayko are definitely top two defensemen. Falk's another really good defenseman to protect. And it's not arguable, Jordan Binnington is their best goalie. When you look at available players, first one that pops off the list is Vladimir Tarasenko. There is some other good ones, though. You've got Jaden Schwartz, Zach Sanford, Tyler Bozak, Robert Bortuzzo, Vince Dunn, Steven Santini, Marco Scandella. You've got some players that you could build around if you're Seattle. To me, I went back and forth between Tarasenko and Vince Dunn. To me, I'm going Vince Dunn still, the one that everyone seems to think Seattle is taking. To me, it's build this defensive core. You can go after forwards in free agency and the draft. And Vince Dunn's a really good young left-handed defenseman and could be a part of that defensive core for years to come. Tampa Bay Lightning are screwed when it comes to this kind of stuff. They've got so much talent. They decided to do a 4-4-1. They protected Anthony Cirelli, Nikita Kucherov, Braden Point, and Steven Stamkos. Defensively, they protected Eric Chernak, Victor Hedman, Ryan McDonough, and Mikhail Sergachev. Obviously, Andrei Vasilevsky is protected. No real debate on any of these guys here. Maybe you could have protected Cal Foote if you're looking to the future at all. But if you're still in full win now mode, trying to go for 3 in a row and solidify that dynasty, this is the way to do it. When you look at available players, Alex Barr-Boulet, or Boulet, more than likely, Blake Coleman, Yanni Gord, Tyler Johnson, who you'd probably have to trade something, or trade a pick or two for them to take that contract. Alex Killorn, Pat Maroon, Andre Palat, Taylor Radish. When you look at defensemen, Cal Foote, Jan Ruda, David Savard, Luke Shen. Tons of talent to choose from here. Seattle's got to be happy with whoever. Seattle takes the call from Tampa They take whatever picks Tampa offers, and they take the contract of Tyler Johnson. Really good third line forward for them. Could be a key part of a playoff push. He always shows up in the playoffs, plays really well. So to me, no brainer there. When you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, they also did a 4-4-1, wanted to protect defensemen. Makes sense. They've got a good defensive core. So you protect your main four forwards, Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews, William Nylander, and John Tavares. Absolute no-brainer there if you're doing a 4-4-1. Those are by far your four best and most important forwards. Makes total sense to keep those guys. And defensively, you keep TJ Brody, Justin Hall, Jake Muzzin, and Morgan Riley. Again, no-brainers here, especially with them looking to trade Travis Dermott after extending him. These are the four guys you keep. And in a really good move, you protect Jack Campbell. And Frederik Andersen is a UFA, I believe. So if he doesn't come down in price, you let him walk, and Campbell's your number one going into next year. Looking at the Toronto roster, there's still some real talent here. You've got Nick Foligno, Alex Galchenyuk, who I believe with a change of scenery, those two would be really good. Zach Hyman, Alexander Kerfoot, who a lot of people have as the pick from Toronto. Jared McCann, who I talked about earlier with Pittsburgh. Really big fan of him. I was hoping Detroit would have traded for him. Riley Nash, Nick Patan, Wayne Simmons, Jason Spetz, and Joe Thornton. Defensively, you still got Zach Bogosian, Travis Dermott. Two really good defensemen exposed. And then goalies. You could have signed Frederik Andersen. Michael Hutchinson would be a good second, third, fourth goalie. Likely comes back as the goalie tandem with Jack Campbell. When it comes to the Toronto Maple Leafs, I picked the guy that I wanted Pittsburgh to protect from the beginning. Jared McCann, really underrated forward, could probably play second line for them. Did really well with extended play time in Pittsburgh this year. I think he only builds on that. Only like 24 as well, so young and can still build. When you look at Vancouver, they were actually in a bit of trouble here too because they've got a lot of good young forwards and they had to protect them. A lot of them were eligible, so sucks that they had to expose one. But they protect Brock Besser, Jason Dickinson, who they just got in a trade, Bo Horvat, JT Miller, Tyler Mott, Tanner Pearson, and Elias Pettersson, obviously. Besser, Horvat, and Pettersson, that's their main core. Oli Hulevy, Tyler Myers, and Nate Schmidt are their defensemen. Quinn Hughes does not have to be protected yet. He was only in his second year in the NHL, I believe, so he is not eligible. Goalie comes down to Holtby and Thatcher Demko. To me, you protect the younger one. No-brainer. Thatcher Demko is your guy. When you look at it, Braden Holtby would be a huge option for them. A goalie with tons of experience and playoff experience to build around. Way cheaper than Price, too. Not nearly as good, but way cheaper. You got some defensemen there. You've got Bowie, Alexander Edler, and Travis Hamnick to look at. Forwards, you've got Sven Baertschi, Jay Beagle, Louis Eriksson, Zach McEwen, Antoine Roussel, Jimmy Vesey, Jake Virtanen. It would cost way too much to get Louis Eriksson's contract off the books to Seattle, and I don't think Seattle wants that kind of money. To me, the youth forward that I said it sucks that they lose out on here is Jake Virtanen. A lot of people like what he's building there with that core. Sucks that they got to lose him. Washington is screwed at one position here, and that is goaltender. you have a tough choice between Ilya Samsonov and Vitek Vanacek. Obviously, you protect Samsonov, though, because he's got the experience and he's your main guy. They also protected forwards Nicholas Backstrom, Lars Eller, Evgeny Kuznetsov, Anthony Mantha, TJ Oshie, Daniel Sprong, and Tom Wilson. Wilson kind of confuses me a little bit, to be honest, but they like him for that grit. They also protect John Carlson, Dmitry Orlov, and Trevor Van Riemsdyk. Defensively, not too much to argue there. When you look at the roster itself, for those available still, you've got forwards Carl Hagelin. A lot of people have him being the one picked by Washington. If you could have signed him, which wasn't going to happen, you could have got Ovechkin, Michael Raffle, Connor Sheary. Defensively, you got Zdeno Chara, Brendan Dillon, Nick Jensen, Michael Kempney, Justin Schultz. Some really good defensemen there. But the pick here is goalie Vitek Vanacek. Is that second goalie with Chris Drieger. Makes a really good tandem. Absolute no-brainer here, I think, if you're Seattle. And the final team is the Winnipeg Jets. So, looking at who they protected, Connor Hellebuck, absolute no-brainer. One of the probably top 10 goalies in the NHL. Absolute lock to stay with the team. Forwards, Kyle Connor, no-brainer. Andrew Kopp, Pierre-Luc Dubois, no-brainer. Nikolai Ehlers, no-brainer. Adam Lowry, Mike Scheifele, no-brainer. Blake Wheeler, no-brainer. Defensively, Josh Morrissey, no-brainer. Neil Pionk and Logan Stanley. It just sucks because they exposed a really good defenseman in Dylan DeMello. You've also exposed Mason Appleton, Marco Dano, Matthew Perreault, Paul Stastny, who's a free agent, Nathan Beaulieu, Jordy Ben, Sammy Niku, and then goalie, not much to look at here, Laurent Brossoit, Eric Comrie, depth goalies. I wouldn't bat an eye at them. Had I not picked so many defensemen already, I would have gone Dylan DeMello. But I think they'd be happy to take Mason Appleton here. Forward, fairly young, low contract. Not too much to complain about there. So looking at this roster, I really like the goalie group. Really like the defensive pairs, that whole defensive room. The forwards, there's a good mix of youth and talent. And to me, it's a team that could win now and is also built to win in the future. Obviously, they've got the second overall pick. I think they take Matthew Beniers on Friday. Could slide right in to the NHL if you want him to. Talked about going back to Michigan for their college season in the fall. So you could get him partway through the season to play for you. But yeah, that to me is the Seattle Kraken roster. Let me know what you think in the comments. Again, make sure to like, share, subscribe. Follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, like the page. And tune in tomorrow at 6 p.m. Mountain Time for the actual Seattle Kraken expansion draft. Me and Andrew will be going live, giving our thoughts, letting people know what the official roster is. We will also be live on Friday, as I said, for the NHL draft. We will be going live at pick 6 when our Detroit Red Wings are on the clock. It just gives us something to recap with those 5 picks already being on the board. And obviously we have to be on there for our favorite team. Thanks for watching. And yeah, peace out.